One last time into the breach, my friends, and this might be the worst of them all. I know that's kind of hard to believe, but wait till the end before you answer, because we're going to break down why the religious are so clueless once and for all. You don't want to miss that, so stay tuned. So here we go again with Braxton Hunter and his very last question for Atheists 2025. Hopefully this one will be less political because you've got no idea how close I got to just bombing out of the whole thing after the last one. I really don't want to do politics on the channel if I can help it. That said, this seems to be one of the longest questions he has based on how the video is cut up. So this might be a long video. We'll just have to see. Will it be a worthwhile question? I don't know. Let's get to it and find out.
Now for this last question, there's a little bit of setup.
That's kind of what I was worried about. This question is literally a third of his entire video, by far longer than any of the others, and I have no idea what he's going to say next. So let's be gracious and let him get through his setup. And I guess we'll have to see where this goes.
Here's a quote from Robin Collins about the fine-tuning of the universe, and I'd like to know what your reaction to it is. Suppose we went on a mission to Mars and found a domed structure in which everything was set up just right for life to exist.
I'm going to respond as the desire strikes me, just like always. So this is going to expose, I figure, all of the failures that the religious have with regard to the fine-tuning argument. The immediate question here has to be, well, what kind of life are you talking about? Because the only thing the religious ever mean is our kind of life. That doesn't mean that's the only kind of life that could ever exist. If it were possible for a life form to exist within the core of a star, then the star could be argued to be fine-tuned for that form of life. Except it really couldn't, because we have no reason to think that said form of star-living life form was ever intended to be there from the start. It, like we, could have just evolved to fit the existing biome. That biome would not have to have been designed to fit that life form. And that's where the religious go completely wrong. They assume that we were intended, but that is incorrect. We are the end result of evolution, and we evolved to fit the conditions that existed on this planet. The conditions were here just to give rise to us. So the whole thing falls apart when you boot their unwarranted assumptions out the door. I don't think this question is going to go as well for Braxton as he hopes, but let's see.
The temperature, for example, was set to around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity was at 50%.
There are creatures living on Earth right now that couldn't survive under those conditions. There are all kinds of animals that live around deep-sea thermal vents, for instance, that could not live on the surface. At 70%, they die. Without those great pressures, they die. Therefore, you can't say that his proposed environment was fine-tuned for life, because he doesn't mean life, he means human life. He's not being honest in his assumptions, because a universe fine-tuned for tube worms or yeti crabs would be very different and not conducive to our form of life at all. If that were the case, not that we'd be here at all, but let's just pretend, he wouldn't be saying, well, look how fine-tuned the universe is. Why? Because it's not getting him where he desperately wants to go. This is where Braxton immediately goes wrong, because he can't be honest about his preconceptions. Most theists can't. This is just talking about creatures that exist on our own planet, not things that might potentially be out there in the universe somewhere, based on entirely different chemical mixtures, etc. This is why the whole thing just falls apart, because they're not being honest at all.
Moreover, there was an oxygen recycling system, an energy gathering system, and a whole system for the production of food.
What food? What about life that doesn't breathe oxygen? If you look at a lot of bacteria and parasitic life, they don't need oxygen at all. What about their form of life? Purple bacteria live in the airless soil of Laguna La Brava up on the Atacama Salt Flat. They use sunlight to photosynthesize arsenic and sulfur for energy. They don't need oxygen at all. That's why you have to ask these people what they mean, and most of them won't be honest about it. They are only concerned about themselves. And that's nothing to be proud of.
Put simply, the dome structure appeared to be a fully functioning biosphere. What conclusion would we draw from finding this structure?
If it looked like what he's picturing on screen, that it was built for a purpose because such things don't occur in nature, at least not the nature on Earth. Maybe that does occur in his hypothetical Mars, and that's something that we'd need to investigate, but this is where he, or whoever came up with it, since I doubt Braxton did, because he said something and I don't really remember what, that's where they're going wrong, because Earth is a natural environment. Some parts of Earth are hospitable to human life. Most of it is not. Without technology, most of the planet is off limits to long-term human habitation. We're not going to be living on the floor of the ocean or at the poles anytime soon. So he's making a bunch of unwarranted assumptions here, and I'm just going to have to call him out on it. Humans can't live in the vacuum of space without aid. So much for fine-tuning.
Will we draw the conclusion that it just happened to form by chance? Certainly not. Instead, we would unanimously conclude that it was designed by some intelligent being.
And that is wrong for all of the reasons that I've already gone into, because every single one of his assumptions and assertions are flatly unjustifiable. We're not special. We were not preordained, and nothing was made for us. We're just what happened given the environment available for us to evolve in. This is a fundamental misunderstanding that the religious have because they're just running on pure fifis and faith, not facts and evidence. They are looking for an imaginary father figure in the sky to take care of them and make them happy, and that, based on the evidence that we have, isn't real. Not that they care, because of course they don't. They just want to be happy, but that's childish and stupid.
Why would we draw this conclusion? Because an intelligent designer appears to be the only plausible explanation for the existence of the structure.
Nope, it's not. It's just the explanation that you like. Because if we did go to Mars and we did find a structure that looked kind of like that, but within it was an environment that perfectly fits some other form of life, some alien form of life, would Braxton say that they must have a god that perfectly fine-tuned Mars for them? Of course not. Because Braxton, like all other apologists, he just can't get out of his own head. He really wants this stuff that he believes to be true, but he can't step back and understand that his preconceptions are nonsense. Just because he desperately wants them to be true, that doesn't make them true. He is not remotely concerned with reality, that those critters on Mars just evolved to fit the existing environment, just like we did. He wants to feel special, but he's not. So, sorry Braxton, you're just being an idiot. Knock it off.
That is the only alternative explanation we can think of, that the structure was formed by some natural process, seems extremely unlikely.
Which is the argument from personal incredulity. Braxton, you are engaged in a logical fallacy. It doesn't matter what you can think of or what you find likely. It matters what is actually true. A couple of thousand years ago, if someone had come up with the idea that the Earth wasn't flat, they would have been laughed off the stage. Probably they would have been killed because that's what the religious tend to do, never mind the fact that they were actually right. The ignorant people of the time, they wouldn't be able to accept it, any more than the ignorant people like Braxton today will accept the demonstrable truth that we are just evolved creatures. Their preconceptions get in the way, and they don't care about the truth. Now, maybe this is a good time to bring this up, but Braxton's video has gotten completely trashed. It's got more than twice as many downvotes as upvotes, and for a channel with nearly 22,000 subscribers, this video has only been watched 3,000 times. That's really common for religious channels, isn't it? So maybe, I thought, that this was a Questions for Atheists video. Maybe it was just his regular viewers that didn't watch it. But no, that's all of his videos. My channel gets more views than his does most of the time. And I've only got about 10% of his subscribers. So this is not what success looks like. It's just not. Wonder why the religious fail at this so miserably.
Of course, it is possible that, for example, through some volcanic eruption, various metals and other compounds could have formed and then separated out in just the right way to produce the biosphere. But such a scenario strikes us as extraordinarily unlikely.
It strikes you as extraordinarily unlikely because you are not concerned with the truth, only your own personal feelings, and you are incapable of separating yourself from your irrational faith. Now, I have no idea how likely such a scenario might be because the whole thing is just a thought experiment, cooked up specifically to make the point that he's trying to make. Here's this thing that we assume was designed because the graphics we're putting on screen were made to elicit that reaction. That's why I don't play with hypotheticals, because they are always biased. I've just explained all of the faulty assumptions that the religious are using because they really like their own religious beliefs. But that doesn't mean that any of it is actually true, does it? Come on back when such a thing actually happens in demonstrable reality, and you can take yourself out of the equation, because I think we're going to be waiting for a very long time, don't you?
Thus making this alternative explanation unbelievable. The universe is analogous to such a biosphere, according to recent findings in physics.
It is nothing remotely of the sort. I've already shown that our own planet isn't fine-tuned for anything. Without our own technology, we are very limited in where we can live. Humans, without thick coats stolen from other animals that evolved to live there, we'd be unable to live anywhere where it snowed significantly. Most of us couldn't live at the top of mountains where oxygen is hard to come by. We couldn't live underwater. We couldn't live on active volcanoes. The list goes on and on and on. This is not being fine-tuned for life. If we look outward, we cannot live on any other planet that we've been able to study, much less the space that you'd have to go through to get there. The universe is not fine-tuned for anything, except maybe black holes. This is just stupid. The raw footage of space that we can actually survive in over the whole of the universe would be 0.0000000, then a near infinite number of zeros, followed by a 1%. Braxton, you're an idiot. You really are.
Almost everything about the basic structure of the universe, for example, the fundamental laws and parameters of physics and the initial distribution of matter and energy, is balanced on a razor's edge for life to occur.
It is nothing remotely of the sort. If the parameters had been different, assuming for a moment that they could have been different because we just don't know that, then whatever had arisen in that new universe would have been different. We wouldn't have been there, but we're not special anyhow because we're just not. We're just what happens when conditions happen to be such that our form of life can arise. And that doesn't make our form of life anything special. Just because you're really attached to yourself, that doesn't make you worthwhile. If no life had been possible, then there wouldn't have been anyone there to argue about it, would there? Because this is really where the religious go wrong. They make assumptions based on ego, not based on any evidence. Fuck your feelings, Braxton. You're just making yourself look dumb.
As the eminent Princeton physicist Freeman Dyson notes, quote, "There are many lucky accidents in physics. Without such accidents, water could not exist as liquid, chains of carbon atoms could not form complex organic molecules, and hydrogen atoms could not form breakable bridges between molecules."
So what? Because ultimately, this is one more place where they go wrong. They are looking for an explanation for why things are exactly the way that they are because they are so emotionally attached to their current reality. But that doesn't mean anything, does it? That we're here means nothing, but that we're here. If the universe had been different, let's play make-believe for a moment, then whatever life arose in the universe, they'd probably be saying the same thing. Isn't it wonderful that the universe was fine-tuned just for us? And it wouldn't be true for them either. This is where the religious go so wrong. They lack a rational view of reality. They don't care what's actually true. They only care about their own emotional comfort. And this is why they're so laughably dumb.
In short, life as we know it would be impossible.
Who cares about life as we know it? Oh, I know he does, but I don't, because all of his arguments hinge on us. But we're not that hot. This is just emotional attachment, and emotional attachment means absolutely nothing. The religious just can't get that through their heads. And in fact, I've had more than a few discussions with theists where I've said that we're not special, and they've gotten mad and stomped off because they just can't accept that. This is another them problem. I hope no one is surprised.
Now, he goes on to say the following. A few examples from the literature of this fine-tuning are listed below.
I will address this, but it's all going to be the same response. If is not because. We can only deal with the universe that we actually have, not the wishes and dreams that you make up in your head. But the religious spend so much time living in their own heads that they can't even see the world outside anymore. That's one of the big problems that they have, after all. So let's get to it. And if this gets too absurd, I'll just fast forward through some of it because this is getting long enough as it is.
1. If the initial explosion of the Big Bang had differed in strength by as little as 1 part in 10 to the 60th, the universe would have either quickly collapsed back on itself or expanded too quickly for stars to form. In either case, life would be impossible.
And there would be no one here to debate the issue. So what? For all we know, there are millions of universes out there that don't support life or that haven't supported life or whatever. So what? We can only deal with the situation that we've actually got, not the 1,000,001 what-if questions that the religious love to ask. It doesn't make us special. It just doesn't. Could it have been different? We don't know. It doesn't matter if it could. What we have here and now is all that matters. Try to deal with it rationally if you could, because that would really be a nice change of pace.
2. Calculations indicate that if the strong nuclear force, the force that binds protons and neutrons together in an atom, had been stronger or weaker by as little as 5%, life would be impossible.
You know, I'm just going to skip all of this because my answer is going to be the same for absolutely everything. So what? This is just idiotic what-ifism. This is like in old movies where people are walking by on the sidewalk and a piano falls out of a building and misses everybody by inches. Well, what if? Doesn't matter. It missed. That doesn't make you special. If it had hit and killed you, would that have made you unspecial? This is just pointless. But this is the kind of mental masturbation that the religious and, to be fair, lots of other people go through every single day. Well, if I was on the battlefield and the guy next to me got shot and I didn't, well, that just means that I'm better than he was. Yeah, fuck you. It's just how shit happens, and shit happening is how the world works a lot of the time. It doesn't mean anything. There is no inherent purpose. The world is just physics doing what physics does. When it comes right down to it, you are no more important than a random rock or tree. And I know that hurts the feelings of a lot of people, but too bad. If a lion catches a gazelle and misses the one right next to it, that doesn't make the one that got away special. Lucky maybe, but special? No. It might go on to pass its genes on to the next generation, and if there was anything that made it slightly faster or more agile, whatever, okay, that's just evolution doing its job. Luck doesn't transfer, though. Sometimes shit just happens. Let's not pretend it means anything at all, because it doesn't. So, lots of fast forwarding, unless I see something that I really want to respond to, which, reading some of the stuff on screen right now, I really can't imagine that's going to happen, but let's see.
Now, these are some of the kinds of facts that are often used to make fine-tuning arguments.
And they're all crap and rely on religious preconceptions, which are, in and of themselves, just crap too. We can't really define life very well. We say, well, this is what life looks like that we've encountered. But that doesn't really mean anything, does it? The definition of life is pretty bad all in all. What about life that looks absolutely nothing like us? That's not even part of the equation. If we ever went to Mars or Venus or whatever, we might wander around and not even recognize the dominant life form that evolved to exist there because it falls outside of our own very narrow definition of what life is. Now, this is just an example, but out in Death Valley, there are rocks that just move around due to a combination of rain, ice, and wind. It's a phenomenon called sailing stones. Now, they're not alive, not by our current definition of life, but if you went to another planet with entirely different conditions and saw the exact same phenomena and said, well, that's not alive, you don't know that. You'd have to investigate it, of course, but for the sake of the argument, let's just say it could be a primitive form of life that actually does move. It just looks like rocks. It's not even on the radar of most people. Or potential life forms based on elements other than carbon. We've never seen one. We've theorized that they could exist, but we honestly have no idea. The religious would just throw that out because it doesn't fit in with their preconceptions. So could those potential life forms existing in a different universe with different characteristics. We don't know anything about that, and neither do you. Neither does anyone. So the claim that life simply couldn't exist in a different situation is just bullshit. That is making an assertion that you have absolutely no way to back up. It's just trying to get where you really want to go, and I'm sorry, but that is just stupid.
Some of the best arguments for God's existence, according to almost everyone involved.
The dumb people. Because I've already blown every damn thing you said out of the water. Not that you care, because you are not looking for the truth. You are looking for comfort, and comfort doesn't matter, but that's all they're after, right? This is when you're so emotionally attached to an idea that you can't stop and think, hey, is that idea worthwhile to begin with? That's where the religious are going wrong. And to be fair, lots of other people too. This is why you have to be able to take yourself completely out of it, and they refuse to even try. If this is the best that they've got, then give up, because you're just making fools of yourselves. But I really like it. Doesn't matter. Grow the hell up.
So here's the question. Are we wrong to think that this supports theism? If so, why?
Yes, you are wrong. This is a very common problem. In fact, it's the same problem as always, because you haven't gotten anywhere remotely close to a God yet. This is the absurdly common argument from ignorance. I don't get it, therefore God. Even if everything you said were actually true, and it's laughably not, but let's pretend, even if it was true, that doesn't get you to any God, much less your specific God. For the religious, God is just this word that describes the unknown, then they just assume it exists, staple all kinds of comforting characteristics onto it, and call it a day. And that is fucking stupid. The answer to all of this is, I don't know, and neither do you. We probably never will. Get over yourself. But they can't do that because they don't care about actual reality. The simple fact is, there's lots of stuff out there that we will probably never know. every question we answer uncovers 10 more questions. Welcome to the real world. Sit down and shut the fuck up because you're just making a fool of yourself. We are very limited creatures with very short relative lifespans, with a very narrow view of actual reality. We're never going to get it all. That doesn't mean you can just make shit up because you don't like that fact. That's why the religious are just making fools of themselves, because they can't get that simple fact through their heads. They can't deal with the real world in which they live, because they don't want to live in the real world. They spend their entire lives in what if, and because, at least according to them, if absolutely is because, they come to ridiculously unsupported conclusions because they want to get that dopamine shot in the noggin that they're really after. And then you get people like Braxton, and trust me, he's not remotely alone, making these absurd lists of questions for atheists and looking really dumb in the process. That doesn't mean we're necessarily right about things, but at least we're not locked into our heads and emotions like the religious usually are. We're not trying to answer unanswerable questions by just making shit up, because we're not that dumb, at least by and large. Maybe you people should give that a shot. I mean, seriously, it can only help.